with our information services manager, so we do appreciate him being able to figure these things out. Certainly it'd be great to be able to do this in person, and hopefully it won't be too long before that happens. But for now, with COVID, here's where we're at. Okay, my name is Eric Thompson. I'm the communications coordinator with the RDOS. Thank you very much for joining us. And again, thank you very much for your patience as we work through some of these technical issues. We'll get going here in just a few moments. Just a very quick introduction. And I think we'll start with just a quick mention of what we're up to here tonight. First of all, we have two other participants that are joining us. Now, the format is a little bit different. Normally, these are set up as an event. This particular meeting is set up as just a meeting, so you'll be able to see everybody on screen if their camera's on. We have two presenters, though. Bill Newell is the Chief Administrative Officer with the RDOS. He's standing by in case there are some questions for him. But our main presenter tonight is Jim Zaffino, the RDOS Manager of Finance. Jim will have a budget presentation for the draft budget for 2021 for Electoral Area I in just a few moments. We'll also have, of course, a lot of time for questions and answers. And we'll have a bit of an introduction here on what we're up to as far as the proposed tax requisition limits. But first of all, here's how you can participate during this electronic town hall. If you would like to ask a question via WebEx or telephone, of course, we'll be given an opportunity to do so based on the time available. And we do have until 8:30 if you're watching live. And this, of course, again, is on YouTube and will be available to watch after the fact as well. If you are participating by computer using WebEx, we ask you to click the raise hand button. You can find that in the panel on the right side of your screen. That will indicate that you would like to speak. Please remember to lower your hand once you have had an opportunity to speak. You can also ask questions via WebEx Messenger. And if you are participating by telephone, please press *3 on your phone's keypad. That will indicate that you wish to speak. Having indicated that you wish to speak, you will then be placed in the queue, and you'll be invited to speak once you're up. And then after that, when you have had a chance to speak, if you could then lower your hand by pressing *3. I'm going to go right to Jim Zaffino now, I think, because the main reason for this meeting, as you know, is to present the draft budget for Electoral Area I. So we'll let Jim do a quick introduction to a video that he's prepared. And then we'll come back and talk a little bit more after that. So I'll hand it over to Jim Zaffino. Jim.
Thank you, Eric. The video you're going to be seeing shortly is a video that I made a week ago. It's based on the first reading that the board accepted. That was on in January. They're going to be reviewing the budget again on next Thursday with some recommended amendments, but for now, I'd like to just take a look at the video and then I'll speak to it after that. Eric?
All right, we're going to throw to the video and I will just mute my microphone for that.
My name is Jim Zaffino. I am the RDOS Manager of Finance. I am here to present your budget for Electoral Area I.
Don't mute.
Thank you for watching. This is a presentation on Electoral Area I 2021 budget, which has first reading as at January 21st. So I'd like to start off with budget structure to discuss a little bit about the municipal government budgets versus regional district budgets. Municipalities have anywhere from 3 to 5 budgets, general, water, sewer, sometimes storm, and electric, while regional districts have 155 services, which means we have 155 separate budgets. Each budget is self-sustaining. There's a number of services that are provided. They are classified as regional service, first of all, and these services are the majority of electoral areas and municipalities participate in. As you can see on the screen, there's a number and there's more coming up. So these are the services that the regional district supplies and benefits the majority of the service members. Types of services continued. Rural services, these services are where electoral area participates and not municipalities. Now, with these services, a lot of the municipalities have their own departments and they tax direct. So where regional district electoral areas don't. The municipal bylaw and building inspection is a really good example. In these cases, the municipalities have their own departments, and again, like I stated, they tax. Other services, shared and local services. Shared services, there's times when a service is benefited by more than one electoral area. And a good example is the Kearmeus Fire Department. The Kearmeus Fire Department is shared by Kearmeus, B, and G, because they get the benefit. And the local service is, I'll use the fire department again, is where a fire department is strictly benefits one electoral area. And a good example is Anarchist electoral area A. They benefit that area and only that area pays. The RDOS budget process, as I stated, essentially it's a 5-year budget with the current year 2021 establishing a tax assessment and the remaining 4 years showing what is projected in the future so that there's no surprises. The RDOS budget process, as I stated, has to be done by March 31st of each year. That's a local government requirement. What affects your taxes? The property assessments is what is actually establishes the portion or percentage that you pay. In your area, 3.6% of the regional total assessed value is pays, where last year it was 3.13, minor increase. The tax assessment increases in the mix actually determines your total assessment and what you pay. So what's new in the budget? The biggest single change is the administrative charge. As of 2021, 20% of the total administration burden is now charged against capital projects. And it's based on a tier basis. What this does is it reduces the overhead on administration for operation. So where operation gets the benefit, it's now changed over to the capital section. What else is new? There's grant requests, which is a normal yearly addition. Proposed change requests, and the majority of this is change in full-time equivalent staff. And finally, capital. There's some new asks every year. With the grant requests, you can see on the screen here what was authorized and what was requested. Also, the next change, and it's every year, there's requests for service level increase, and the service level increase majority of the time means staff increases. So with that, start off with a 0.65% increase, and you can see benefits mostly the recreation area, but you'll only get taxed on it is if this individual will actually benefit your area. This one here is a 1 FTE for the technical project management. Again, only those that benefit will pay, and as stated on here, you can see that electoral areas are getting the benefit, not municipalities. This one here is for 2.35 and 0.38 FTE increase for the majority is mosquito control, $18,000, and this is something that the board authorized, and we kind of hard to look at the mosquito control department. These are the last two for FTEs. It's directly to the 0.4 for the Similkameen Recreation and 0.26 for Oliver Landfill. These are the capital projects. These don't worry about the costs. These are majority funded by reserves and or grants, where you get benefits from, you will have paid through it through previous taxes where there was a transfer to reserves. And here's the rest of the capital projects. And this is a summary of the budget for 2020 and 2021. You'll see it's 59.2 million, which 9.2 is capital projects, again funded from reserves or grants, and 5.4, which is contingent on receiving the grant. If we don't receive a grant, we will not do the project. This is the tax requisition that your area will pay. It is $1.4 million. You'll see it's 3.48% increase from previous years. It does state on the slide here how that increase is arrived at. Essentially, it's $49,400 more than the previous year. What's important to note is that as at first reading, it did not include the COVID grant funds that the board received. The board has subsequently determined where the benefits will go to each area, and the tax requisition will be adjusted accordingly for second reading. This is your tax requisition for Area I. It has the projects based on tax, based on assessment. These are the additional taxes for the regional director of administration determines the budget. Again, these are also taxed based on assessment. Finally, the requisition for the regional boards for the Okanagan Water Basin, the sterile insect release. That's something your director does not have any control, or the board has any control. That's given to us by an outside agency, and we just put the tax in as stated. This is the tax requisition split up by area. So you'll see the Clayton, Twin Lakes, and St. Andrews. What this means is not all of the areas get benefit. For instance, the Clayton Fire Department costs are not charged to Apex. So what I did here is I separated and did the net average for each area. This is the tax requisition that is for the member municipalities, Penticton, Indivan, and the 9 electoral areas. You'll see that we're asking for 20.6 million. This is a pie of who pays for what. Very quickly, as you can see, the bigger pieces of the pie, who's paying.
To review Budget 2021 in more detail, please visit the RDOS Regional Connections public engagement website, www.rdosregionalconnections.ca. Click on the Budget 2021 tab. To provide feedback, send an email to budget@rdos.bc.ca or drop off a letter in person at the Regional District Office, 101 Martin Street in Penticton. Thank you for watching.
All right, thank you very much, Jim Zaffino. Jim is here live, and he will join us in just a moment with Q&A portion. So if you have any questions, and remember, you can access the detailed budget to www.rdosregionalconnections.ca. A quick note about the service establishment bylaw compliance issue. The regional district has become aware that the stated bylaw requisition limit set out in a small number of service establishment bylaws has been exceeded. The RDOS has completed a review of the bylaws and identified those which are currently out of compliance. Each year, the regional district undertakes a public engagement process in each electoral area and municipality with respect to budget for the upcoming year. The RDOS has created videos, one of those you just saw, specific to each electoral area. They're posted on the RDOS website and YouTube. Links also available through RDOS Regional Connections. The RDOS is proposing to take a three-pronged approach to ensuring the 5-year financial plan is consistent with the requisition limit. This is to mitigate issues that became a focus during the loan authorization process for Colleen Recreation Programming, Parks and Facility Maintenance Local Service. The approach includes increased controls, processes, and training of department staff on bylaw interpretation, better communication and engagement with citizens, and a focus on bringing outstanding bylaws back into compliance. Now, for questions about that issue or anything to do with the Area I budget, Jim Zaffino is here to answer your questions. We also have CAO Bill Newell on the line available as well if there is anything that he would like to add information to. So with that, let's take a look and see if we have any questions that are pending. We have our chat available for this particular meeting, and then we also have, of course, people who are joining us through the phone line. And I think I'll get things started with Jim Zaffino. Jim, if you can tell me, what is the biggest challenge in putting together an electoral area budget when you're dealing with so many different budgets?
The challenge is there is 155 budgets, and each one does have a specific limit, either based on a dollar limit or based on assessment. So one of the first things that I have done, which the board will be introduced next Thursday, is they're going to see a budget that every single 155 of it show if they're compliant or not, and it actually will show how much the bylaw number and how much the limit is. But the biggest challenge is trying to look at balance the budget with the reserves. You want to make sure that when you do finance something with a reserve, that it's there, and I believe I've done that now.
Okay, and I'll just remind anyone who would like to ask a question, all you have to do is raise your hand if you're joining us on WebEx. If you are on the phone line, you can hit *3, and that will indicate that you would like to speak if you have a question for Jim Zaffino, the Manager of Finance.
If I also may speak, this presentation was based at first reading, and the first reading for Area I was 3.48%, as I stated. However, I want to make clear that at that time, the COVID funds were not part of this, and they're going to be introduced to the board next Thursday. Area I, as did all the rest of the regional areas and regional districts throughout BC, did not get the same amount of funds that municipalities did. In total, our regional district got $733,000 to split amongst all of the 9 areas. Of those, of that amount, Area I received $48,557, of which $28,712 could be used to reduce taxes. That $28,712 equates to 2%. And your director gave me the approval to look at the tax requisition and reduce the expenses. And on Thursday, they will be voting on that. So I just want to make sure that the 3.48 is not definitive, it's going to change.
Okay, I just want to confirm with Danny Francisco, who is the Information Services Manager, that our audience can hear Jim speaking. I just had a text from someone who said they were having trouble hearing Jim. He should be on the same microphone probably as me. I just want to double check that. So if we're having trouble hearing from Jim Zaffino, that of course is something that we will try to fix here right away. So again, we have our chat available. If you are using the WebEx system, you can go into the chat to ask a question and we'll get your answer out right away. Again, if you've logged into WebEx, you can also hit *3, or sorry, you can raise your hand. There we go. So we've just adjusted the microphone for Jim. So I'm going to go back to Jim for just a moment. Now, just to review the process, because I don't see any questions just yet. We're at first reading now with the board. You've had a chance to review the budgets and have given first reading.
Yes.
Second reading will happen when?
It will happen next Thursday. And the majority of the changes are carry forward adjustments. When the budget went to the board for first reading, there was some carry forwards. However, it was early in the year. Staff did not know exactly where they were for projects, or even if the projects should be finished. And at this point, we know what the bottom line is, so we were able to change the dollar amounts where it was guesstimated at, let's say, $10,000, and it's only $8,000. So a majority of those were that kind of adjustments. So there's other adjustments where staff saw that there was a need for something, or something should be added on. And in other areas, the director asked myself to change the budget for specific reasons.
When you look at a budget for an electoral area, it can be daunting for people, especially who are not necessarily familiar with how these budgets work. I'm going to put on the spot, if I can, what would you recommend to members of the public who are paying for these services to be looking for when they look at a budget? Because the idea with doing public engagement on budgets is to get feedback, have people ask their questions if they're not sure, find out how the money's being spent. What should people be looking for, and what type of feedback are you looking for?
So the easiest thing is, one of the new procedures that I initiated is, first of all, what's been happening in the past is every electoral area has its own tax requisition. It's daunting. There's a lot of different numbers on there, descriptions, dollars, but up until now, they never pointed back to the budget page. On each of the requisitions now, there's a budget page. And from that budget page, you can go right to the budget, because the budget goes from page 1 to page 155. So for instance, if I go to the electoral area I can look at emergency 911. It tells me that it's department code 400, doesn't mean anything to anyone, but it tells me it's on page 87. So I can go to page 87 of the budget and then look at the details. Look at this reserves, look at it now. It tells us the budget from second reading, and going forward, it will tell us if it's compliant or not. And the other thing too is that, just to reiterate, it also tells us if we anticipate that it's not going to be compliant in the future. So there's a lot of information just by simply looking at the page and then going to the budget.
Okay. I mentioned at the onset there, we had talked about compliance and making sure that these budgets, the tax requisition limits are in compliance. Is there feedback that you need from the public that would help with this process, as far as the money that's being spent, how it's being spent, that type of thing?
That's the reason why we're having these sessions, is to look for feedback. As it stands, I would document the feedback and then make them part of the report for the board. I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation along with the presentation for the budget. Currently, I do not have very many comments, but any comments I receive will be part of my PowerPoint presentation.
I should ask you as well, and I know you're the manager of finance, so you have an interesting take on things because you're right in the middle of it all. where does the area director fit in with each one of these budgets? Because we're talking about nine electoral area budgets, and then we also have the municipal budgets on that. But for an electoral area, the area director has a fair amount of involvement in this process.
Yes, they do, right from the beginning. I'm essentially the conduit where everything comes to me, but someone has to come to me with some ideas and some costs, etc. So what I do is I put everything together that is submitted to me, and then I say, okay, this is what the cost is. And if it's overly expensive, that's when the director will go, no, let's cut back. In fact, before it goes to the first reading, there was 2 other drafts that there was 3 meetings, but 2 drafts where the board reviewed the budget, and there was many cuts to drop it down so that the tax level was reasonable.
Okay, we don't have any questions at this point. Oh, it looks like we do. Where will I find that one? Is that from Darlene Bailey? Is that right? Nope. Oh, it's in the chat. Oh, you know what? I don't see that one for some reason. Sorry, just give me a second here. I'm just looking through the chat. Danny, I don't see that question in my chat. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm gonna have to, Danny, I'm gonna ask you if you get a moment, if you could come over here and just help me adjust my, oh, there we go. Okay, now I've got the space. My spacing was compromised, we'll say. Okay, here's a question. Given the way the presentation goes so quickly, a video is not very helpful. The Regional Connections webpage seems to only have the budget video. It doesn't really inform. The detailed budgets are listed on the RDOS website, I believe.
Yes, they are, and that's you would want to take a look. Like I stated earlier, go from your tax requisition to the page, and then once you've done that, it does have my email and phone number to phone and talk to me direct, and that way I can make information or document it and pass it on to the board.
Okay, maybe I'll ask Danny if he could bring that up. I'll put him on the spot again. If you go to Regional Connections, there is a link to the RDOS website that has the finance information on it, and the budgets are listed in there for each electoral area. But how far into detail do you go?
The tax requisition is at a summary level, but the budget is fully detailed. It's line by line. Every item that is authorized, the board sees it, and so does the electoral.
Okay, so while we're talking, I'll ask Danny if he's able to find that, if he can maybe bring it up, and then we can show people. So if we scroll down here on Regional Connections, there are a number of different documents and links. Sorry, Danny, we have to click on the budget one. Yeah, there we go. So when you go to Regional Connections, you'll see budget. And then if we scroll down, you'll see the key dates. And we just added another one there, March 4th for Area D. But if we scroll down to there should be a link down there, from what I recall, on the total requisition summary. And let's go to that one. Now this is the overall.
So that's the overall, and that just tells you what the big picture is.
Okay.
So if you keep going,
if we go back to the other page there, there should be a link as well, and I think it's sorry, we're kind of doing this on the fly here. If we go up again, Danny, there should be a link that will take us back to, oh, there he is. Okay, the RDOS budgets and financial statements. That's the link. Under electoral area budget and video information. Now this will take us to the RDOS webpage. Now, Jim, maybe you can tell us from here what we should be looking for.
Well, there should be on there two types of documents. One which has a tax requisition by electoral area, and so it goes from A to I, and then it has the 155-page budgets. Each one is its own service. Each one has a specific bylaw, and each one also has a tax limit, either based on assessment or a flat rate dollar. Now, I've also found while I was going through looking at the bylaws that there are amounts that are unlimited, and there's probably 20-25% of those are.
So if we click in this particular case on 2021 tax requisitions for each area,
yes,
that's what we're looking for.
So look at that. That's the good one to start. So go down keep going. We'll go to the, we can go to, well, we're on I is the last one, so it doesn't, if you want to go to I, for instance. And I is the easiest one to find. I just hit N down and I've got it.
So I'll take note of the fact that this is not easy to find. When on Monday, I'll make sure I go back into this regional connections page and try to highlight this so that it is a little easier for people to find, but it is in there. It's just.
So as I stated, this is your tax requisition. It shows the tax for each services and a comparison from previous year. On the far left, you'll see a page number. That page number correlates to the actual page where it has the detail of how that is made up of. So what you see there is there's a section on every page in the budget that has either tax requisition, user fees, or recoverable. In the recoverables ones wouldn't be here, but the parcel tax and the tax requisition would be. So as I stated, for example, page 87 is 911 emergency. So if we go to the next link where it has the 2027 budget, we should, this could be made easier. I can help you with that.
Yeah, I think we should try to lay it out a little easier, but I think the key is the information is
But
there.
it is there. So if you go to the 2021 budget now, and keep going.
Only 5 pages.
What's that? So that's not the one that's just about the report. It's 155 pages.
So is there a chance this link you're looking for is not here?
It was part of the budget presentation at the
We'll have to review that. So the important part of this process is that if people are looking for specific information, they can't find it, it's important to send an email to budget@rdos.bc.ca or make a phone call.
Or phone call, and I will personally answer both. But we will make it easier on Monday. So what I can envision is having it all on one page.
I appreciate the comment here from the person who asked the previous question, saying this may be part of the reason why it's hard to ask good questions. Well, certainly, if there is information you're looking for and you don't have access to it or you can't find it, please don't hesitate to contact Jim, RDOS, budget@rdos.bc.ca, and you can also call him directly. But that's why we're having this session right now, is to talk about that and make sure. Obviously, we're going to follow up on Monday and make sure this is.
I've been living the budget for 4 months, so a lot of it I can answer off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good question. Is if people are looking for, people probably want to go through the documents line by line, and things might jump out at them versus just coming up with a question off the top of their head. Have you been receiving questions from people on similar items that keep coming up?
No, just specific to different electoral areas. Very specific.
Yeah. Okay. So in the meantime, we are here to answer any questions that you might have. I think we've just uncovered an important one, and not necessarily the best venue to do it, but it's important that people can find what they're looking for. So that's what we're here to do, is make it as easy as possible to find. I think normally with budgets, they can become so detailed, but there are people who make it their job to look into those numbers, and making the numbers available is exactly what we're working to do.
Yes.
So we'll make sure that happens. And again, all of that information will be on Regional Connections, which is www.rdosregionalconnections.ca. And again, if you have any questions, you can go into the chat if you're watching on WebEx. If you are watching this on YouTube and something has come to mind, don't hesitate to send an email, or you can, of course, call Jim Zaffino directly. And I know you're very busy, Jim, but you're very good at getting back to people in a timely manner.
Yes.
We appreciate.
That's my goal.
So if there are any other questions, if you're watching live and you're participating in WebEx, you can, of course, raise your hand if you're logged in via video, or if you're on the phone line, you can hit *3, and that will indicate that you do have a question. Pretty quiet so far, but I think the key element we've uncovered here is access to the detailed budgets, not just the overview. Now, the overview, when we look at that overview budget, the high level, what do we get from that? What does that provide as far as information to the general public?
At the high level, it provides a comparison from one year to another, and it also provides a comparison from one electoral area to another to see what kind of services, the dollars, etc. For instance, for electoral area I, $14,340 is a 1% increase or a 1% decrease. So when your electoral area director looks at the budget, they are very cognizant of how much the tax increase is based on the ask, and also on the decrease.
While we have a moment, we should talk about the municipal budgets as well. You're doing, we call them road shows, where you're going and virtually for the most part, you're doing these budget presentations for the municipalities as well as the electoral areas. What is the biggest difference, would you say, between the municipal budgets and the electoral area budgets?
Well, as you know, Eric, I've done 40 different budgets between two other municipalities. Biggest difference is that municipalities have 3 budgets and sometimes 4, where regional districts, we have 155, and each time there's a new service, though that increases. So it's very important that when you do the tax requisition, it is detailed so that the people that do end up paying see what the bottom line is. If you look at the 155 budgets, Danny, I don't know if you could share a screen, because that if you do share a screen, you can actually show what one looks like. Looking at the 155 budgets, you can look at the detail of what is spent in 911, what is, when we look at electoral area administration, what is involved. But it doesn't tell you how much your taxes are going to be at the end. It's very important that the summary relates to how it affects your property taxes. The other thing with municipal governments is that they have one administration fee, and it's consistent with usually between 18 and 20%. With regional districts, you have an administration fee called on a tier basis. So the harder, the more expensive the budget is, the higher the administration fee. And this year, you may have seen in the paper a little bit of controversy on the administration fee. We're trying to be fair. The board wanted to be fair. They accepted a philosophy that it turned out that was working, is better than last year's based on what I'm hearing. However, not everyone could be happy about it. There's different ways of doing it, but I believe the way that we're doing it is fair to everyone and is transparent.
So we have a question back on chat. How do the resources for bylaw enforcement get calculated? This person says there have been issues where more bylaw would be appreciated, things such as vacation rentals. Would that mean that residents would need to put more money into the budget, or the RDOS put more money into the budget to get that supported? So again, the question is, how do you resource bylaw enforcement? How does that get calculated?
So bylaws is calculated essentially just like any of the other expenses, in that it's based on staff, the staff wages and support. But before I go, Danny, this is just before I go any further, what you see on the screen is a budget. So if you could just bring it up just a little bit so you can see a little bit more of it. But going back to the bylaw, you take a look at the wages, the support staff, the administration for the support staff, and then you look at who gets the benefit. Because like, for instance, going back to Penticton, Summerland, etc., they have their own bylaw and they have their own taxes. But the electoral areas don't. So there's electoral areas that benefit from the bylaw, and it's based on assessment. So if you need more or want more bylaw, there would have to be an FTE full-time equivalent request, which then goes to the directors. The directors will vote on it, and then they would hire staff if it's successful. But if I may, if you look on the screen here, what you see is a budget for the Anarchist Mountain Fire Department. So that's page 1. If you go to the bottom right-hand corner, it says page 1 of 155. And you can see how much detail it is. So the more detail it is, the more control there is. And one of the things that we're doing in 2021 is we're separating all the capital projects so that each capital project now has its own unique identifier, so that we can quickly take a look for asset management, how much it costs, if we're under budget, over budget, and make sure that nothing was charged to the wrong account. So it has the current year, as you see, and it has the next 4 years. So that's something that's statutory that all local governments must do. So the first year is used to calculate the tax, what the tax would be for that specific year. The following years is a projection, and it doesn't mean that is going to be in stone, but it's a start that the board will look at, and in 2021, early 2021, and then start to formalize where they want. So the more service you want, the more the service level dictates what you're paying for. The less service level, the lower taxes. Higher service level, the more. And one of the things that the board's now changed is the use of surpluses. The surpluses were used sometimes for certain services to what I call artificially reduce the tax requisition. The board now has changed that, where the surplus, when possible, because this is the first year that we're doing it, and sometimes because of the prior years, we can't do it exactly 100%. It goes into reserves, and then that reserve can be used for whatever reason it's needed in the future. And the reserve that will go to will be operating, because there's more of a control if it's operating. So that if you need it to repair something, you can draw from it. But if you put it into capital and you need an emergency repair for something, then you can't, because capital, it's a statutory reserve, and it's only specific for the capital that the bylaw was written for.
And these are the detailed budgets you were speaking of?
Yes, these are the detailed, and like I stated, there's 155 of those.
Okay. So right now we're looking at fire protection for Collegian, and maybe while we're talking, Danny can scroll through and we'll find some more for Area I. Of course, this is the draft budget for Electoral Area I. And Jim, are you able to see the chat on the right side there?
No, I can't see it.
We have two questions pending, and I'll ask you to start with the first one here if you can. Can you review the specific CalRec budget? I assume that's Collegian Recreation budget, operating and maintenance versus capital.
So I'll just go to Danny, I'll give you the page number that it's on. Recreation Commission budget, that looks like it's on page 36.
So Jim, I'm gonna step out for just 1 minute, just looking for something. I will be right back, but I'm gonna leave you with this question, if you can tackle that for us. Reviewing the specific CalRec budget, operating and maintenance versus capital.
Okay, so if I may, operating costs are staff costs, for instance, anything to do with parks. There's the contract services, so the contract services would be for cutting the grass, maintenance, and whatever's required for the areas there. Building maintenance, whatever buildings that we have. Just quickly going down through here, the park improvements. And it's something that all local governments have to live with. Property insurance and liability insurance. A lot of times, a lot of people may not realize this, but if somebody falls in a park, gets hurt for whatever reason, we're the first ones that people go for insurance and suing us. So under the local government, we do have both property and liability insurance. Recreation supplies to keep the park going. So the advertising, we also have the utility. There's utility costs. There's transfers to reserves in there. So that transfer to reserves will tie into the capital question that you just talked about. Capital costs should be funded either from reserves and or grants, or a portion of both. So if we have a 5-year capital plan, and we do have a good plan, and we're going to make it even better, we'll be able to know how much reserves we need to meet the needs for in this case, the Clean Parks area. So there is an expense in there every year that transfers a certain amount of funds from the taxation to the reserves. A lot of times it's just based on, in the past, it's also based on limiting the tax requisition. In a perfect world, you'd want to put in there as much as you can, but you also have to look at, and your director and other directors will also look at the affordability of the taxpayer. So you have to juggle both, but when you do that, you also have to know that you can't afford all the capital projects that everybody would want. In my history there, that I've seen is there's a lot of good ideas that come out there that people would want in different parks, but you have to wait to afford them. And it's through the reserves that you can afford them. In some regional districts, not municipalities, fund capital projects from taxes. And what happens is that you get a zigzag increase, decrease in your tax requisition. And that's not something that is, I think it's beneficial to anybody, because you really can't budget something when you do that. One of the proposals that I'll be recommending to the CAO for the 2022 budget is to split the budget that you see there into two. One that's strictly operating, and that way it's black and white, and there is a flat line, usually with a small inflation increase for the tax requisition, and another budget for in this case I'll use it for the CalRec, that's only capital. And in the capital section, it should only be funded from, again, going back to reserves and or grants or donations. But sometimes if there's a need, that you would have to take a look and finance the capital through taxes, or borrowing is another way of doing it. But then that goes to debt servicing, which goes to operating. So on capital though, as it is now, it would only be, if you see a capital costs, it would be capital expense at the bottom, and on the top part, you'll see how it's funded. And if you don't see a specific line, in this case here, you'll see at $800,000 for the Clean Hotel as an expense, but you also see $800,000 as a provincial grant. So that, earlier in the presentation that I did, I had a number, I believe it was 5.2 million, that said that those are the amounts that are conditional on receiving grants. So in this case here, because it's an in and an out, there's no tax implication. But there, in other budgets, you'll see that there is the expense for capital, a portion of it, because the reserves there isn't enough to fund it, is funded from reserves, and then the rest would be funded from the taxation. And again, that's something that splitting the two would from operating capital would actually help the directors see that the impact that happens.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jim. Two more questions now on the chat. Recreation increased by $11,000 plus. What are residents getting for that increase? I'm going by the question here. I don't know.
Okay.
If that's...
Well, one of the things, first of all, just remember that the budget that you're looking at is pre-COVID. So that's something that your board director would have discussed with me, and I listened to her, what she asked me to do, and that's been changed. So when you're looking at this tax requisition, what at the point of this budget, as you see here, there was some increases in staff for requests for FTEs, just because the staff needed to keep up with the specific level of service. So what I see here, there's $7,600 increase for service level increase. And there's also some other increases in here. So I'm just quickly looking at the budget. There was some supplies costs were increased. And one of the things that you need to also understand in this budget, it's very unique because I call it a COVID budget. So I keep saying that this is before the COVID funds were distributed, but there's COVID expenses in here that wouldn't have been in here in prior years. So with your directors recommendations, that's been corrected with the limited funds. I'll call it limited funds because regional districts, I think, got shortchanged. That's my opinion, only my opinion, but I think that we should have got more, which would have reflected the budget even better.
More municipalities are saying
More.
receive more money.
Yeah, more than municipalities, yes.
So the question, though, is a good question as far as the bigger picture of people are asking, what are they getting for, not necessarily the increases, but just what are they getting for services? This detailed budget itemizes, in a general sense, what this money is going towards, all the taxation.
So if I had the manager of the recreation department here, I will defer that to that, because you're talking to the finance guy.
And we're talking specifics for an electoral area 1 of 9.
Yes.
So you are a smart person with a lot of information in your head, but specifics to the service, okay.
Specific to the service, I can't speak to.
Point taken. But another good reason to contact the RDOS directly, and we, the organization can make sure that if that's a question you have and you can't find it in these budgets, someone will get back.
And that's, I just wanted to state that if I can't answer something like that, I will give you I'll have the person phone you.
Yeah.
And that's one of my philosophies is, if you phone me and I can't help you, I'm not going to just pass the buck. I'm going to see if I can find the person that can help you.
Excellent. Okay. Another question now. What is the plan to increase revenue on the community hall by $10,000? Do you have that information handy?
I'll have to see here. The community hall,
That might be something we'd have to get back to you on. And
yeah, I'd have to get back to that.
Okay.
That was one of the areas that was given. That's a question that I'll get back.
Okay. Now, a point here is anything that we're not able to answer here that's finance related.
We can get back to them.
Yeah, and we have the RDOS Regional Connections budget page, and certainly we can post it in there in the Q&A section to make sure that you have the answer. But going back to the previous question about specifics on the service itself, I would invite that person to contact the RDOS directly.
Correct.
If they have specific questions. But this latest one here, the community hall, will definitely put that on RDOS Regional Connections.
Yes.
And again, I would like to remind you that if you have a question and you're logged into WebEx, I see a hand up, and it is the area director, Sabrina Monteith, who probably has an answer for us. So let's go to Director Monteith.
Thank you, Eric. I want to thank Mr. Safino for the amazing budget. When we initially got our budget and I saw the bottom line and the proposed increase was 14.89%, I had a little heart attack. And Jim worked really hard with me to make sure that we got it down to where we have it today. So I'm proud of the budget. To answer the question to Greg about the community hall rental, that's a direct impact of COVID. We're not getting the rentals at the facility that we would normally get, so that's the impact there. The question about the Kaleden, what was the question there about the
recreation increased by $11,000 plus? What are we getting for that?
So that directly relates to the FTE position for the Similkameen that we're sharing a portion of for maintenance, as well as the shoreline stability that is required at Pioneer Park. So that's asset management.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to add, Director Monteith?
I'm pleased that lots of people are interested in the budget and that it's an interactive opportunity for everybody to have their say, and it's an important process to go through. So I'm glad that we have lots of eyes helping guide the process.
Great. Okay, well, thank you for weighing in. I really appreciate it. Okay, and I'll just remind Director Monteith, if you could lower your hand on that one, and then if we see it again, we'll know that you're going to jump in again. And I'll remind anyone who is logged into WebEx to raise your hand using that feature on the right side of the screen, or if you are logged in through the chat, you can ask us a question that way as well. And then, of course, people are also on the phone and they can hit *3 to ask a question. Jim Zaffino, I've got another quick question for you then, while we have a moment before we have any other questions coming in. Just to review this process for people who are watching, you start this process of creating budgets for the RDOS for all the different services, for the electoral areas, for the municipalities, and also for the hospital district.
Correct.
When does that start? That starts, I believe, I mean, it's pretty much a year-long process, but it really begins for you, is it November?
Well, I started with the regional district September 28th. And at that time, the budget information was due to me October 9th. But because of the gap of where there was no manager of finance, I started getting the information in November. However, I'm used to having a budget start in June.
Oh.
Very preliminary, lots of meetings with, I used to have the meetings with the councillors working for municipalities. I expect to have meetings with the directors so that I have an idea. I'm not telling them, I'm listening to them. And then I talk to the managers and make sure that the expectations are met. The boards for the recreation commissions have, I believe, till October 15th or 19th to submit their budgets to finance. But by starting early, we can actually have a lot of the information done and corrected. When I was a regional district employee 14 years ago before I left to go West Kelowna, I left having the budget passed the first week of January. I'm used to having early passes, but because it started late, next year will be different. We're starting early.
And the province mandates that the budgets be finalized March 31st, by March 31st.
For regional districts, it's March 31st. For municipalities, it's May 14th.
So you mentioned this early on, that second reading of the budgets will happen, the RDOS overall budget, we'll say, will happen at the
March 4th
meeting.
And
is that for certain?
it's in, yes. And it's going to go for a third adoption March 18th. I've already had directors come to me as recently as today to look at adjusting, fine-tuning their budgets.
And the fine-tuning can take place until when?
Until it's adopted.
So right up until potentially the 18th.
I made some today.
Okay.
But it's not going, those changes won't go to the board on Thursday. Those will go later.
Okay. I mentioned earlier as well the service establishment bylaw compliance issue, and the RDOS is looking at a three-pronged approach to ensure the 5-year financial plan is consistent with the requisition limit to mitigate any issues. Those steps are increased controls, processes, and training of department staff on bylaw interpretation, better communication and engagement with citizens, and focusing on bringing outstanding bylaws back into compliance. The challenge with all of that is there's so many different budgets. You mentioned 155 of them, but the process has really begun already, hasn't it? Like you have in your position started to make sure you're doing house cleaning, I think is what I'm getting at here, that to make sure that there aren't issues going forward.
We've added controls based on, we talked as a senior manager level, there's now controls in every one of the 155 budgets. It's transparent. The next budget that will be on our website will have what the tax limit is, and the words compliant, review soon, or review now will appear, and it will change with each budget.
So what that does, it takes away, in a sense, part of the human component where something could get missed because maybe somebody interpreted it differently, but it actually builds in a process that says you have to take these steps at this stage of the process.
That's correct. It was important that I included this, what I call it, the control, in the budget that the board sees now. So from now on, going forward, that will be part of every budget.
All right, another question here on the chat. Would the current 32 cents per $1,000 meet 2021 budget needs to operate and maintain the current Caledon recreation level. So the current 32 cents on $1,000, I believe, is how you would say that. Meet 2021 budget needs to operate and maintain the current Caledon recreational levels.
The numbers that the legislative services were given would meet. So one of the things that happens is, I've noticed some regional districts do this and some don't, is the bylaw either has a set limit or a set limit with a cost per thousand, or just a cost per thousand. And in other cases, they just have unlimited. And that one there's quite a few, I believe I said 25% I noticed that there's unlimited. However, when staff was asked to look at what is affordable and what should be recommended, we looked at a 5-year budget, not the current budget. So if we gave you the current budget, it would be outdated the day that we pass the bylaw. So we anticipate what the growth will be, what the assessment will be, and what the budget increases will be. So answer to that is we should be all right.
Okay, thank you for the question. I'm going to ask Danny Francisco, who is our Information Services Manager, if you could share screen again. Danny, I'm going to put you on the spot again and go back to that RDOS Regional Connections website, because early on we had a conversation, we had a question about the detailed budgets, and they are available. You can find that information by going through the links, but I thought since we have a moment, this would be a good time to do that for anyone watching, because the last thing that the RDOS wants to do is make this information difficult to find. It's intended to be easy to find so you can have your questions answered. So if we go to www.rdosregionalconnections.ca, you click on the budget project tab, which is where we're at right now, and then you scroll down. So you'll see who's listening first of all, which of course is Jim Zaffino, Manager of Finance, who's here with us tonight. And there you see his phone number and his email address. You can also send an email directly to budget@rdos.bc.ca. So if you have any specific questions, that's where you can start with. And then key dates, of course, tonight's meeting, and then we've just added another one today, which is for Area D. That meeting is coming up on March 4th. And then if you go down even further, you'll find those budget videos. So we showed a budget video earlier, and someone mentioned that, it does go by quite quickly. It is a high-level overview. You can, of course, press pause along the way to stop and take a look at some of the slides, but it was meant to be an overview. And then if you're looking for the detailed budgets, you would click on the third item down there, budgets and financial statements. And then once you click there, you will have to then go to budget 2021 information. And again, this is the part we'll make sure that's a little bit easier to find on Regional Connections so that you're not having to hunt. We want this to be front and center. And then the link, I believe, Danny, you went to is that one there, the draft 5-year bylaw. So I'm going to hand it over to Jim now, if you can just jump in on that one. So if we click on this link, we're finding 155 different budgets for the regional district.
That's correct. So Dan, just scroll down a bit. That's just this. So this is stop right. This is just a index. So if you're just looking at the services, it's got the service number, the description, the type of service. For instance, what you're looking at right now is rural service, animal control, building inspection, etc., and the page number. So then if you go from there, keep going down. That's just the index. So now you're starting to get to the budgets. This is on a spreadsheet that I created. It actually has over 5,000 lines. It's 155 services, 5,000 lines, very detailed. And that's, the more detailed it is, the more transparent it is. And that's what kind of directors you have, is directors that want to show you the detail. And they pass the budget knowing full well all the detail, and that you have the access to it too. So again, Dad, if you just go down to the bottom of one of the budgets, just to show where the page numbers are when you are looking. So there you are, page 1 of 155, and if Danny scrolls down just crazy, just one after another, you'll see every one of them one after another. And the what you see also that I added, and I can't say if it was there before, in bright yellow, is the tax increases. that is projected. And again, the only one written in stone is the current year. The other 4 years are a starting point, and that could change.
So when you're looking at this document, anyone looking at this document, this could potentially change. Parts of it could change.
It can change. So this is the first reading one. There's a numerous amount of recommendations for the board to look at. A lot for what I'm used to, but that's because there's a need. So just because we have a budget, we're not going to say no, we're not going to change it because we want to finish it. We want to make it right. And there's amendments that are recommended by staff, and then there's changes that are asked for by the directors. And the first thing, just so that everybody knows, and I've noticed this, and this is common, first thing that your directors look at is this affordable? And they go from affordable back to the budget, and then they make recommendations. So that's something that I told the directors I will go out of my way and make changes right up until the last moment. Like I stated, I had a meeting with the director today. He looked at his budget, and we changed it based on his recommendation, not mine.
We heard earlier from Director Monteith, and you've had an opportunity to speak directly with each one of the directors.
Yes.
On the different projects, on the different costs, and I'm guessing that they're asking you for some advice on what is affordable as well, but more importantly, they're sharing with you what citizens are saying to them that they want. How do we afford it? How do you, I mean, there isn't a lot of room really to there's no slush fund of funding available. There's only a certain amount of money based on the service and the tax requisition. So you're somewhat limited in what you can do in your flexibility on these budgets. Is that right?
We're very limited. The director is the first line that I don't have the privilege of listening to the electoral areas. There's 9 of them out there. I have to listen. I listen to the area director, and they feed me the information. They look at the budgets. They have opportunity that we have one-on-one meetings. We've had quite a few with some of them might be 4, 5, 6, and even more. But ultimately, again, 155 budget does not say what the bottom line is. So we do what I call a what if. So the director will come to me and says, okay, what if we do this? What if we do that? Because sometimes the directors will try to be fair and juggle that limited amount of funds.
Well, here's a comment on the chat. This meeting seems unorganized and unprepared for. Well, the thing with a live meeting is that, first of all, we did have a technical issue at the beginning, and that's a challenge right off the bat. I would say that this meeting is prepared for in the sense that we're here to answer questions. You're the manager of finance. You can answer the questions you can answer about the budget. Specific questions about services might have to come back to the manager in that department. So I appreciate the point, but with regard to, for example, the detailed budgets, the information is in there. It's just a matter of, I think we uncovered through this meeting that you do have to. There's a bit more searching involved than would be ideal. So we'll rectify that, and that's part of the conversation, is to make sure that people are getting the information they need. If they don't have the questions, if they don't have the answers rather they're looking for, this is the time to ask them. Do the best we can to fix that.
In all the budget meetings I've had, and I've had quite a few, this is the type of meeting that we're used to. It's the question and answer. This is how you learn. And if we can't answer it now, the idea is we get back to you later.
Yeah. And again, we're, I'm basically interviewing you here because we have an hour and a half, and we don't want to cut the meeting short and just stop talking. The opportunity, I wouldn't be talking if we had questions nonstop. We would just be simply answering those questions, but that's not the case. So I do apologize if it seems unorganized. Because
I apologize too. It would be different if it was live. There would be, if it was live, there would be placards all over the place here with specific information, and the budgets would be available hard copy. That's what I'm used to. I'm not used to the COVID meetings, so it's something that we'll have to look at and see and learn.
You know, with regard to COVID and having to have these electronic meetings, I think the upside is that it does make it available for people who don't necessarily want to go out to a physical meeting, and it's available on YouTube now, so people will be able to watch after the fact. How much they'll get from it, I'm not sure, but I think that the silver lining is that we have added technology to the process for the better. Once we can get back to physical meetings, that will be even much better, but still having that electronic component, I think, is important for access.
It is, and at the very least, we are giving out information.
Yeah. So let's talk about COVID for just a moment. When you're putting this budget together, you're doing so in the middle of a pandemic where there are a lot of question marks, and there are a lot of issues. We heard earlier about a lack of funding coming in from facility rentals, and I know that departments are looking at improving that process post-pandemic to make sure that RDOS-owned facilities are generating even more income by just being diligent in promoting that. How challenging has it been to put this budget together when there are a lot of variables you don't know?
It's been very challenging because a lot of times you review the budget and I'm asking the question, why is this 20% higher than last year or 10%? And a lot of times the answer is COVID. Or why is the revenue reduced? So a lot of times when you see the revenue, when you look at after the board passes the second budget, you'll look at the revenues and you're going to see a dramatic change. Like I will emphasize, we did not get the amount of money I think we should. So at the end of the day, I think the electoral area residents are paying extra because of the benefits municipalities got.
Let's talk about that for just a moment. When you're talking about the funding from the province, is that right?
Yes.
The COVID funding that it was distributed to municipalities and regional districts.
Yes.
And proportionately, I believe it was the municipalities got more.
Yes. So a good example is, because I did a report for Area D, a good example is if Area D was a municipality, they would be getting close to $1.4 million based on the population that they have. And municipalities that are smaller than Area D got more. And they're able to take that money and spread it out to help the taxpayer.
Come back to COVID in just a moment. We have another question here on the chat. Would it be possible to put what the tax requisition rate will be on the service budgets? Then residents could compare with the requisition limits.
Can you say that?
Yeah, I'll try that again. Would it be possible to put what the tax requisition rate will be, put that on the service budgets? And then it says then we could compare with the requisition limits. Not sure what that means.
Well, I think I understand is we take a look at what the tax requisitions are. So there's a tax requisition for each of the electoral areas, and let's say I'll use the fire department for Anarchist Mountain. Let's say theirs is $2 million. What is the tax limit for that, and what is the difference? Mm-hmm. Can it be done? Yes. Do I have the time right now? Not right now, but it can be done. That's something that if the board wishes, I can include that in the tax requisition.
For future years?
For future years.
Okay, and that's a good point. I think that's the kind of information these live sessions can yield.
And one thing I want to state is, again, that's a good question. Just I itemized it on all 155 pages, but it can be, now the other thing is that not all services have a tax limit.
Okay.
So that could create a problem.
So that would be the requisition limit.
That would, in that case there, I would use the requisition as the limit. Each year it would just automatically go up.
I see. But
there's some limits, and this goes back quite a ways. A number of years ago, the number is very high. You know, there's some are unlimited and some of them are high that we'll never reach.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so back to COVID for a moment. The change, what will we see going forward over the next a couple of months, do you think? Because the COVID money that came in from the province was distributed throughout the organization to make sure that each electoral area had access to that fund.
Correct.
And then also corporately. So how did that play out Because I know, I was at that board meeting, I remember hearing the electoral area director say they'd like to see that money get distributed more to the areas. How do you go about doing that?
So we received $773,000 for all electoral areas, including, just so you know, it also included the municipalities. The board, I think rightfully so, took 300,000 of that money was used in general where look at for office space for COVID related issues, to look at leasing some space, and it'll be rented using COVID money. That's a portion of the money. There's another portion used to get specific agenda software so that when the board has meetings, you're not scrambling around looking for the agenda and pages, etc. And then there was another, I believe, 35,000 for an accommodation needs, a further report on how much space do we need and still work safely. The rest of it, there was an additional 477,000 that was redistributed back to the electoral areas based on population. And that's how the province gave us the money. It was based on population. And that's also how they give the money to the municipalities, except the cost per capita for municipalities was significantly higher than the cost that the regional districts received.
So, to put you on the spot here, for electoral area I, do you have an indication of how electoral area I would be spending their COVID money, this COVID money, and what it would be used for?
What I could tell you is, because the board has to vote on it, is the board allocated, the way I stated it, they allocated the funds. Area I received $48,557, of which $28,712 is used by the director to make recommendations to, for each one of the services to reduce the tax requisition. So the electoral area director, I believe, did a very good job. And that $28,712, just so you know, distributed into the region, into area I, is a 2% decrease. As I stated earlier, 14,340 is a 1% increase or decrease. So that 28,712 equates to 2%.
Where would that money go? Is it just?
It would be as recommended by the area director.
Can you give us an idea of what types of things?
Well, I don't want, that's something that on Thursday that they're going to be voting on.
Okay, I see.
So all I can say is it's in the budget, and that's why I said earlier that 3.48 is not that, may not be that after Thursday.
Okay, you've made the point that municipalities receive more money than regional districts. Both regional districts and municipalities, I believe, are under the same mandate from the province as to what the COVID funding can be spent on and what it can't be. Is that correct?
We have the same restrictions, yes.
Yeah. And what types of things are we looking at? You mentioned it already, but we're talking about COVID related.
Okay, lost revenue from last year or this year, that would be the biggest one. There's additional costs, fire departments. So the fire departments are spending a lot more money on safety, which is rightfully so. So that's another area. Just as a municipality got this excess money, they have a fire department which they can help enormously with the extra money that they got. We have 7 fire departments in 7 different electoral areas. Unfortunately, we don't have as much money to help them out, but that's where another area where it could go. Communications, where it could go towards WebEx meeting, having the smart boards, just as we have here. So things like that. And then to offset extra park expenses, for instance, where this is a good example, where we had 1 truck, 3 staff members. We now, based on the rules, we have to have each truck with a different staff member driving to a site. That's expensive. That adds up. And it's to me, I'm not being popular with the province, but I think they should relook at the formula. And again, that's my opinion. I can't speak for the board or the regional district.
Well, Jim, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know that it has been a very busy time for you, and I know that you're a hands-on person who would like to go out to each and every electoral area and talk to people in person. As I mentioned earlier, though, the the silver lining, I think, in what has happened with COVID and not being able to get together is that hopefully there are a few other people who maybe have tuned in or taken part in the electronic process who wouldn't otherwise. So if we can take anything positive away from this, that's what it is. This meeting, just like the other electoral area budget presentations, will be available to watch after the fact. If anybody's looking for something specific, it will be on YouTube. Again, I'll remind everyone that RDOS Regional Connections, that's www.rdosregionalconnections.ca, is where you'll find more information about the RDOS budgets, all 155 of them. And you can get the detailed budgets. We're going to take a look at that site again on Monday based on the feedback we received tonight, just to make it easier to find these things, these links, because of course you don't want people to have to go on a hunt for them. I found this very informative, and I do appreciate all the work that you and your team have done, and the electoral area directors as well, in providing the feedback. And of course, not to forget at all the citizens who've taken the time to look at these budgets and provide their feedback.
And I just want to say one other thing is, you see me here talking. However, I have all the managers and my CAO that helped with this. It's not just me. They did a great work, and I'm only as good as they are. And wow, they made me look good.
Well, again, I really appreciate your time, and just while we have a moment, I'll take a moment to thank Danny, Danny Francisco is the Manager of Information Services here at the RDOS, and his job throughout COVID has been very difficult, and the people in his department as well, in trying to make sure that we can all stay connected, make sure that the communication with the public is actually working. And we had a little hiccup at the beginning there, but Danny was able to fix it right away, so I appreciate that. Appreciate everyone joining us, including our electoral area director for this area, for Area I, Director Monteith, and we also had Director Coyne Jr. from Princeton, the Mayor of Princeton, Spencer Coyne, who was tuning in as well to watch, so I appreciate him. He gave me a little feedback on text there to tell us about one of our audio issues, so that kind of feedback is certainly invaluable. But again, Jim, thank you so much, and a reminder that you'll be back again March 4th for the budget presentation for Area D. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. Have a great night.